I'm Hannah.
I'm Laura.
And we are two best friends who cover a new book series, one book at a time. Right now, we are crying as we finish
at the end of
breaking
the
the
world.
earth. We're at the end of the world. We finished breaking into
We
the
broke
earth.
the earth.
We went into the center. Father Earth was really pissed at us. He's a
evil
bad
Earth.
hang.
We're at the end.
Yeah, evil Earth. We're at the end. But so it's our wrap-up episode. There's no reading, watching, and or enjoying. We're gonna dive.
This is like the
right
first
in.
like traditional season that we've had in a while, honestly,
I know.
because all of our other seasons, my bad, ones that I have suggested have been like ongoing series, so we haven't really been able to do a series wrap up because we've been returning to them.
Right. I mean, you do tend to pick longer or unfinished series.
Ongoing series, yeah.
So that's awesome. I mean, it helps that
It's
the
fun
ones
to read those too, but I feel like this is the first one we've done in a while where like it's a completed series. So it feels weird.
How do you feel overall with your suggestion and with the fact that you kind of led the whole conversation this season? I definitely want to hear your thoughts on your overall view of
I mean,
everything
I
that's
don't think I
happened.
suggested this. I think you had originally pitched this a
Oh, I had
long,
pitched it.
long
You're
time
right.
ago. And then I read the series last year and loved it. And so I was like, I really want to cover this. So I was very happy with being able to cover this. And I think it was different to be the person covering the plot, and life has just been very stressful for me recently, so it has been
made
difficult.
You appreciate me
The
more.
last book has been very difficult for me to cover, honestly, because things in my life have gotten extremely stressful. So but I do really enjoy doing the plot breakdown. I'm not opposed to doing it in the future. I just want to do it during specific times in my life. Not when I have a million baby goats being born and a bunch of things going
What are
on,
you
like
busy with,
tax
though?
season, So it's kind of a lot for all of those things to coincide at one time. So yeah, it just happened to be a horrible storm of things happening at one time, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I really enjoyed this series, especially on a reread. So excellent.
Yeah. I'm so jealous of you that you got to do a reread on this because I
I
feel
mean,
like
you
this
can
is
do a reread.
I know, but I
Do it
feel
right
like this
now.
is a book. I'll start right this very second, guys. Let me
Oh,
open
this is
book
the
one
end of
for
the
you
pod.
all. This is the end
Hannah's
of the pod.
going to
Hannah's gonna
reread.
leave.
Goodbye.
Okay. It was a great wrap up. Thank you so much. Goodbye. um, but I do think that this is a book that would be interesting upon reread because there are so many layers to this series where this was also a new experience for me, where this is the first one where I wasn't doing the plot breakdown and I wasn't taking as
So you get
many
to go with the
notes.
flow a little more.
Yeah, I had to go with the flow a little more and like kind of trust that I mean, there have been series where Laura has taken notes. There's been series where she hasn't taken notes, and I kind of
I
went for
usually
like,
take a lot of notes in the Dresden Files series just because bizarre things happen.
yeah, you kind of have to know, or like sometimes Cell becomes an owl in the Legendborn series, and you just never knew, and you're like, do I have notes on that? But I do think this one I kind of went along for the ride a little bit, also because I've learned that with science fiction, sometimes I am definitely along for the ride where I don't always know exactly what's happening, but I'm enjoying it.
Hmm.
Where you're
Hmm.
kind of like, I have no idea what's going on, but it's exciting. And I do feel like there were parts of this book series where I didn't always understand what was happening, but I knew that I liked it and it was deep and it was intellectual. And so I do think it is like rife for a reread because once you
Sure.
understand who's the moving characters, what the moving parts are, I think you can get to a deeper level of an understanding of what exactly is happening in the plot. And I would appreciate that.
I think you just touched on also like a couple of things that people generally mention when they talk about this series is that one, it's very much like the author trusting the readers to
Yes.
just kind of understand the world building and not have to have everything picked apart
Exactly.
per se. And then honestly, I forgot the other thing that you mentioned that I remember now. That it's kind of in this gray area between science fiction and fantasy. And I know
Yeah.
that science fiction and fantasy used to be considered one big genre
Hmm.
back in the day
Oh,
of
back in
probably the
my day.
90s. Those old people.
Ugh.
But I think that now we have so many different breakdowns, even within the fantasy and science fiction genres. But I think that this is a unique book, and people have a hard time classifying it as to
Yes.
what genre it belongs to. So I think it's interesting. You tend to call it science fiction more so, I've noticed,
Yeah.
just, and I'm not like calling you out on that or anything. I don't think that
No.
there's any right way to label this book. And I have often said on the podcast before, I don't know that we need to be so strict with labels
Right.
on genres and everything. But I think it's interesting the way that people try to define this series because
Yes.
it's such a unique book series that it's hard to really put a label on it.
Well, and I do agree with that, and I do think I'm probably limiting it a little bit by saying that
I'm
it's science
not
fiction.
criticizing you. I just think
No,
it's
obviously
interesting that
not.
you kind of lean towards
Yeah,
calling it science fiction.
I definitely lean towards calling it science fiction more so for the energy of it. Like
Mhm.
and I think people could probably push back on me on that fact where they're like, it's not science fiction. This isn't real world building. This isn't like some type of world that could exist. And it's like, and like it still has like that energy of like we're
You could
learning
also
about this
very much be
different.
like, this is a dystopian.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's dystopian. Who cares? And I think that I just got so much sci-fi energy from it where there was world building. And like maybe that's where I'm used to in fantasy, people explaining the world that you're in. And I
Hmm.
don't
Hmm.
think I was always like, I don't think N.K. Jemisin thinks she has to explain it. And I do
Right.
value that because I like that kind of storytelling. I like the kind of
Hmm.
storytelling that's like, fill in the gaps. We're not really here for
Hmm.
5,000 pages of Robert Jordan telling you what type of fashion is in style in
Right,
a
right,
certain
right.
culture. So I do think that's where I lean more towards like, I'm like, oh, the vibes are sci fi because she trusts you and you kind of have to make logical leaps for yourself. And I've found that that happens more to me in sci-fi.
I think
But
also
yeah,
just some of the things that I would call out as being more sci-fi related, just from my own perspective, would be the very strong, like, natural elements that are present in the book.
yes,
There's a lot of talk about the moon. There's a lot of talk about all of the different climactic things, apocalyptic weather events have happening within the story, and those all tend to make me feel like this is a science fiction story. I don't
yeah,
know why whenever I think about any kind of like weather related event, anything related to the stars or the moon, I'm like, oh, it's science fiction.
right.
Absolutely. And this had so much about the moon.
It was
So
all
there's,
about the moon.
yeah, but I don't know why I'm generally like of the mindset of like, oh, if there's a lot of emphasis on like how we connect with nature and the world and other beings, I'm like, science fiction. and
Yeah,
and that's not to say that that doesn't exist in fantasy as well, but those elements kind of made me think science fiction. But also, especially when we get into the third book, we kind of drift away from origins being misunderstood and a little more fantastical to understanding like, okay, there's all of these very scientific things that are happening, these experiments that are being run in labs and all these different things that
yes,
are these very advanced worlds and cities that are put together and everything. So I think especially within the Stone Sky, it definitely becomes more science fiction for me.
yeah. I would definitely agree with that. It just kind of lends itself towards science fiction, but there's also fantasy elements where in the Stone Sky, it feels like we kind of got Hoa's backstory overall, but also there was like pulling back on it where I was trying to think like what exactly did we learn about Hoa? And I was like, not that much.
Not
Like not
much.
much about his world. We kind of just got overall vibes and how he was feeling about that place and time and who he
Hmm.
was at that moment. And so I'm like, okay, well, that also doesn't lend itself. It does feel more sci-fi because of that, because it is more like blanketed over, but we're also not learning too much about the world. It just like
Hmm.
it has very interesting textures. And it's one of those books where you mentioned at the beginning of this episode that we only have three. And I could have used 500 more pages in this world. Like, if she wanted to give it to me, I would have read
I,
it and enjoyed it.
I
Like,
think honestly that it could have easily been a longer series, that
yeah.
we could have learned more about like all of the little nitpicky things regarding the ways that origins came to be and their background. And you know how
Hmm.
people write books and they have like all these appendices that are full of all of the different, like, oh, I'm looking at you, JRR Tolkien, like all of the different histories of the peoples and everything. And it's like, here's some like random paragraph on how this
Mm.
person did one thing in this year. And it's like all of that stuff could have been expanded upon, and there is some info in the back in the appendices of these books as well on different
Yeah.
seasons, but I think it's not really that much info in terms of like you're talking in
It's kind of
regards
like
to
a
like Hoa
timeline.
and
Like,
the origins and how things actually came to be. There's not much info on that.
yeah.
And it could have been expanded upon, like you said, like could have easily done 500 more pages. Like, and these are not the longest books ever, honestly.
No.
They're like 400 or less. So,
Like, even a lot of times when we hit 500, I was like, hey, the font is big. Like, Orbit, I
hmm
have learned, is not shy about a big font. They were like, we're
right.
here for you to feel like you're running through these, even if it's long.
hmm
And so I did feel that energy where I was like, oh, the font's big, the words are big, like
Can
you're
I
moving
also just
through
point
it.
out, I love an Orbit paperback. Orbit,
Oh
will
gosh,
you
they're so
send me more paperbacks? Like this is
good.
this is me calling out Orbit.
Orbit, could you sponsor the podcast?
Please
We're here
sponsor
for
this podcast.
honestly,
I
I
really
think
enjoy an Orbit paperback. They are like the perfect texture and feel. Like they do a good chunky paperback, like the right size. The John Gwynne books are from Orbit.
oh, yeah, they
The
are.
Yes, and so are the Children of Time books, and they're like the perfect little texture. I love the cover of them and everything, and I just like to hold them. I'm like,
Here's
oh,
the thing. I
what a
understand why
nice little
people
paperback.
think Tor is the original fantasy imprint. I'm an Orbit girly at the end of the day. I think, like, not to go off on a tangent, but I love a good Orbit novel and I love Orbit fantasy. I think they do a
I
great
have a lot
job.
of Orbit books.
I know. This is such a
This
specific
episode comes
tangent.
to you via Orbit. Whoops.
Whoopsie daisies. I love
Also, like
Orbit.
I have a lot of tour books too,
Yeah,
so that's
yes.
we're not knocking tour, but
No,
I
no, no. We're not
really
saying
enjoy a lot of what Orbit
Tor.
has put
If
out.
you want to sponsor the podcast, you can. I'm reading a book right
Yes,
now that I
also.
love, and it's from Tor, and like the world building is beautiful. But like, I love a good Orbit novel, and
Ah,
like
and I'm
anytime
just telling you, the feel of those Orbit paperbacks,
I also get a lot of
spectacular. I
I
miss
get a
mass markets, but these
oh
Orbit
yeah,
paperbacks are pretty dang close
I
to
get a lot
hitting
of
that spot for me.
Orbit arc books from NetGalley, and they also have like beautiful structure when putting it on a Kindle. It
Mm.
makes it so readable. It's so nice.
This episode brought to you by Orbit.
Orbit. Um, but yeah, I think like these books are so quick to get through because they're from Orbit and Orbit knows how to create a book
hmm
that is readable. But
It's just a great company.
we're just huge fans. Please send us more books. We'll read them.
I'll just hold them. You know,
Yeah.
I'll just hold them and carry them around and tell all my friends, like, just feel this. You'll want to buy it just for
Laura
the feel.
Laura and I have thrown out like, oh, maybe we should put episodes on YouTube. Da, 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 da. We could just have a YouTube miniseries where we're sitting here being like, Orbit. This book is from Orbit. Look at the
I'm
beautiful
telling you,
coloring.
ASMR fans, you'll love an
Oh,
Orbit book. Just tap on one of those covers. It's just the
should I
perfect texture. Just the tapping. Oh my gosh, Orbit, your books are great.
um
I got Shadow of the
as
Gods right here. I'll just
yeah.
tap on it.
Oh, oh, I can't hear it. You gotta get closer. There it is. Get those brain scratches. What a very random tangent.
Ah,
But
I love an Orbit paperback.
to bring it back to this particular Orbit paperback,
hmm
I do feel like we could have spent so much time. And I'm so impressed with N.K. Jemisin because I was thinking a lot about her as an author. And it doesn't feel like she wastes any words. Like it feels like she knows how to market her books and how to make them the best they could be. And I'm just so impressed overall with her as an author, with being able to make these books so full of lore and world and emotions and relationships and not a ton of pages. Like it's
hmm
amazing because you and I have read some books that go on
Forever.
and these do not waste or mince words at all. And I think it's our first experience with a book like this where it's like, oh, I could like we've always said like, oh, I could have had more, but this is the first series I felt that we've had like on the proper series where it feels like She didn't mince any words. It was exactly what she wanted it to be, and she knew the story she wanted to tell, and it was perfect. And it's just so
Mhm.
impressive.
Yeah, I don't know as far as the marketing. You said that she markets it. I don't know as far as that because it seems like she's a very private author, which
Yes.
super respect that. I was thinking about that earlier too because I was reading another book and the author is also very private. And I was like, you know what? I kind of respect these authors who are just like, you know what? I'm just gonna drop an awesome book with super heavy themes and just let you all wonder about me. And it's like, okay.
I
And
think I mean
that's
marketing more for like how she like has it for fan, like this is a well-known established series, and it seems like
I
she
mean,
knows what
I
she's
feel like
doing when it
she
comes to that.
wasn't that on the scene until she had this series, honestly. And
No,
then
not
it
before
was
the
just like,
series.
Hugo, Hugo, Hugo. And
They
everyone
said
was like, we love you.
you're amazing.
But I
Be
want to
featured in
say, just
orbit.
from what I was reading in the back of the book, just like her bio, what I believe she was a journalist previously,
Mm,
if I'm remembering right. And then she got into writing uh, fiction, and she's clearly very good at it. But
yes.
I think what's most impressive to me is the way that you can tell her own lived experience as a Black woman, like, definitely is
Yes.
infiltrated within this series. And I, I hate that, this has to be the way that like white people learn about the experiences of other cultures. But
Yes.
I, I do think that this is a good entry point for some people to kind of open their eyes to like, oh, like there are other people besides white people out there. Oh, we have done extremely horrific and shitty things to other people. Like what?
Lessons
And
we're still learning in 2025 for some
yeah,
reason.
like
Like,
and
yeah.
I'm not saying that this is the way to learn about other people, but I think that Jemison does such a great job adding so much depth and covering like very difficult themes, and especially like
Yeah.
allowing readers to make those connections between like, oh yes, this is something that is very relevant to the experience of Black people,
Yes.
and have that come through on the page of these fantasy books without like blatantly saying it. Like some people apparently need to be told like, oh, this is
Yes.
this is what happened to this group of people. But I think just so many themes within this book, like colonialism, and in the last book we talk about like the diaspora and everything.
Hmm.
And I think that it's just so powerful to see the way that she was able to create this story and bring in these themes that are present within her own life and the lives of so many other people, and make that this incredibly rich and deep meaningful story.
Well, it's so important. It shows why diversity in publishing and diversity in writing is important, because I don't think
Mhm.
this is like, again, we're not two white women saying this is the experience of the black
No, no, no,
of
no.
every single black person, but we are saying like this is an important note about the harm and about trauma and about digging deep and finding healing through your trauma, where it can still
Hmm.
not be okay that those things happen to you.
Yeah.
And we reflected and felt a strong, attachment to these characters.
Hmm.
But it's important to note that we understood that this was talking about a very specific experience that we may not have experienced. But she, like Jemison, does it in such a way that is leading us by the hand through this very specific
Hmm.
experience and letting us watch it and keeping our eyes open. She's not sugarcoating anything. It is very frank about what it
Hmm.
means to need forgiveness or to be unable to give forgiveness or to
Hmm.
recognize that you may not be
Or just
able
the
to be
questioning of
forgiven.
identity,
Yeah.
within the series. I think
Oh,
that
yeah.
when we're talking about what it means to be an origin or who is an origin or the creation of origins, how they came to be, the treatment of them, I think that, and even just reflecting on Nasun and her relationship to being
Yeah.
an origin in the last book and how that identity is questioned and try somewhat try to remove her from that.
Yeah.
It's very, very important to think about the ways that the identity the identities of people throughout time have been stripped away from them, and how a lot of people are left in a somewhat in between space of feeling like they don't belong because of the traumas and things that they have undergone
Yeah.
for
Sorry.
generations.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry, I'm gonna pause my May tag because it is so loud right now, and I'm worried you can hear it.
Briggs is snoring, so
Oh,
hopefully you
okay.
can't hear that.
No, I can't hear that, but I could hear my washer like, and I was like, okay.
My pasteurizer
Um,
will go off soon, so I'm gonna mute when that happens, and I'll have
okay,
to
that's totally fine.
turn it off.
Um, I I definitely agree with everything you have said, and I think it's so well said. I also think something you and I have talked about with certain other books, kind of like ML Wang, sort of Kaigen,
Hmm.
is very specific looks at motherhood and the non-traditional feelings
It's
and
so interesting that you just brought
relationships
that up
of
because I was
motherhood.
literally going to try to transition into womanhood in general. And I was
Okay,
going to
perfect.
mention that specific book
Oh,
as like the other one that we've really connected with in terms of
yes.
like depictions of women. So it makes me happy that your brain also went there.
I think it's because both of those both like that series, that book and this series have resonated so strongly with us. Like we are two women in our 30s. I think we've both thought about motherhood or womanhood and its own complexities a lot in the last couple of years. And so it's interesting reading these books about women who are older in age, who aren't the 20-year-old or 15-year-old ingenue, like breaking into the surface and being like, I'm here and I'm
Well, and
young.
I also think too, you could consider the characters in this book to be a less conventional type of
Yes.
woman. You know what I mean? Like even
Mhm.
it, we often get in fantasy series like she's a princess who is going to meet up with Randall Thor, and they're
Yes.
going to and
She's not like the other girls. She holds a sword.
she might do secretarial work for him
Yes.
at some point. Like that's kind of a depiction that we get often, or just like the girl who leaves the little town where she's pretty much only herded sheep, and she goes off to marry the prince, and oh my gosh, she can use a sword or
She
a
can
bow
also
and
talk to
arrow.
animals.
Yeah, that's
Like,
kind of like what
yes.
we're used to. And I so appreciate this book and also the Sword of Kaigen for doing something. It's not the same, but something
No.
similar where we have women who are, not in this like will they, won't they. There's not this huge
Mhm.
romance plot or anything. It's very much based on their journey in their womanhood and their relationships as mothers and their relationships with their children, which I think is fascinating, but also just kind of figuring out like their own identity as a
Yeah.
woman. So
Well,
I really think identity is just such a huge theme
yes.
within this whole series, but I I love the depictions of the different women within specifically this series, the Broken Earth trilogy.
Well, Nate, I think it also gets to something very specific where the story that we have found a lot throughout time is like the story of love or happily ever afters. And I think it's interesting to read a book about someone who didn't necessarily get their happily ever after in the typical sense, but they made a life that they feel was well established and enough for them. And I think that that's so impressive to watch. And
I
it's
think this book
important.
also does a really good job of portraying like there are glimmers of happiness and hope
Yeah.
throughout a really terrible time, which
Hmm.
I think we all need right now.
Yes.
But there even like Esun, she's going through it. She's having literally the worst experience of her entire life and
Of her 10 years.
has had so many horrible experiences throughout her life, but she still persists and keeps moving
Mhm.
forward and still has moments of joy. She has moments of happiness when she's around the fire with the people of Castrima, when she's traveling with Hoa and with Tonki, when she's with her children, and like she does have these moments when she's with Alabaster. And so it's not all the gloom and doom,
Right.
even though things are really crappy and horrible things are happening or have happened.
Well, and something I really like about this book is even though she kind of delineates herself into the different sections of her life, she's still lived a life. Like when you're reading about all of the things that she's done and she's persevered through, it's important to realize like wow, she has been on this earth for 45 years and you feel that. Like you feel that she didn't just wake up one day into existence. It's
Mhm.
been a long time. She has gotten to live. And I think that that's also not something we always get to see in literature. We're always kind of
Right.
dropped in the moment and we're told that they had a life before them, but this
Hmm.
feels like Nasun feels so, or Asun feels so lived in. Like she just feels
Well,
so
I think
lived in
part of
when
that
we
is
meet
we
her.
do get the entire journey,
Yes, yeah.
really, where other characters we are literally dropped in and just kind of told like, oh yeah, like back in the day this happened or whatever.
Hmm.
If we ever get an older character, most of the time we're dropped in around 16, 17,
Yeah.
and they're like, I'm off to battle the world with a prince. And that's kind of where we're at. But I think this we do get all of Essun's life.
Yeah.
And so
I,
we're able to understand her journey more and kind
mhm.
of we do feel like it's lived in because we've lived it with her. We've been
Right.
there from the time that she was a child.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. So yeah, I just think the identity of it all. We've read some amazing books about older women and older 40 or 30. Like they're not that old.
I mean,
But
that's not that
like
old, but
no,
I
it's
think it's
not.
also
But like
interesting too
it's
the depiction of Essun within this book as being like not your typical body shape to
mm-hmm.
also being a quote unquote older person, but someone who doesn't feel like they're super young because they've been through it. They're tired. Been she's been going through incredible amounts of stress for years. She's also been, quelling shakes and she's
Yes.
been using all of her power and everything. And also just like the normal aging process. I mean, the aging
Yeah.
in itself is hard, but then you throw in all of these other things that have happened to her. It's like tenfold harder. And it's kind
Yep.
of interesting to see those depictions of someone who's, not the typical body shape, that's
Mm-hmm.
not someone who looks super hot and young and has like perfect hair or whatever. She's mentioned to have like graying hair. She's
Mm-hmm.
mentioned to have like wrinkles and sagging areas. She
Yeah.
has had children, so she's not
She said
going to
her hair
be.
looks like ragged a lot of the times
Yeah.
because she's malnourished or just because she's an older woman and like
Hmm.
hair changes as well. So like yeah, she is your atypical person and she's such a good, well-rounded character where something else I noticed about her is she has complex relationships that are not typically seen in a
Yeah.
novel series. So her relationship with Alabaster is incredibly unique, where there is
Hmm.
so much love between them, and not
And
capital
so
R,
complicated too. Like it's incredibly complicated.
but it's like lowercase romantic without being sexualized, capital R
Hmm.
romance, but they have such a deep love for one another and a deep existence that's tied up in one another. Like we read Alabaster's words about her, and he is constantly thinking about her and his love for her and how he wants her to be happy and fulfilled, even though he's going to drag her into things that he knows will make her not happy and fulfilled. And she has
I
that.
often think about that, like when I'm thinking about like their relationship in particular. You know how people will talk about like, oh yeah, like I have a romance with my partner or whatever, and
Mhm.
we connect on this level. But people also like share like the Grey's Anatomy thing where they're like, oh, you're my person type
Yeah.
thing, where it's like they're not romantically involved, but they're connected on a deeper level. But specifically, Alabaster and Essun have had so many shared experiences and have like this connection just from being two brilliant people that I think obviously Alabaster was going to be drawn to Cyan and think that she's someone that he could build a home around. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? That this could be his new home, his new person, because he has never had that type of
Mhm.
connection. And then also just to find someone who he thinks is maybe on this level of understanding.
Yep.
I think their relationship is fascinating.
It is so fascinating. It's just so well, and like the fact that they were in a complicated like sexual relationship with
Hmm.
someone else, and they were doing it successfully. Like, this is one of the best representations
Hmm.
for that type of relationship on paper, where it's not exactly like a throuple or things like that, but it is
Hmm.
polyamorous in like a very specific way. And I thought that that was really well done and well thought out. And seeing their overall relationship, and then that bridged with, Esun's relationship with her late husband, where it it derailed and it became awful, but she talks about how there is love there because he gave her the children that she loves.
Yeah.
And she also understands that the love wasn't quite actual romantic love the way it could have been with someone else. She said she found someone that she needed a partnership with. She wanted her children, and he gave her those. And so she could appreciate him on that level. And I think that's very unique. So she's not someone, she had like a
She's very
great.
intentional with all of her relationships.
Yes. And I think that that's such a specific look that we don't get to often see in books
Hmm.
because it's a little bit too complex for a lot of books to handle this kind of like
Yeah.
nuance.
Well, and we talked a lot about Lorna in the past few episodes about how
Yeah.
we were like, we don't care for this relationship. We don't get it and everything. But I think it's just a very mature look at what a person might do and what they might cling to or look for
Hmm.
in an end of the world situation.
Well, and it's companionship, and it's something that
Hmm.
like by the end of the book, Esun realizes that she
Or just
needs
comfort in
deeply.
somebody that they know
Yeah.
has similar background or like, oh, hey, remember when we did this or that? Like, yeah, totally.
Like her more impressive relationships at that end section are like Tonki, or the fact that she found a community who wanted to travel with her, because the as soon of the beginning of this novel series would
She would have done
never,
it by
she
herself.
she would have been like, no, get away from me, I can handle
She
this.
barely wanted to take on Hoa and only did it because she was like, he's a little
Helpless
kid.
child. Like, and he just keeps following me, and I'm not
Mhm.
sure he's eating, but why would I ever assume he was a stone eater? But like, even that relationship, there's like this weird community where she just kind of
Mhm.
accepts what relationship she has with the person that feels the most real to her. And that's such a hard thing to do, and Jemison executes it so effectively.
Hmm. I think some of the other relationships that really stand out to me in this series overall. So Alabaster and Cyan, especially through the
Yes.
first book, we get so much of them that's just fantastic. But I think when we get into the Stone Sky, we kind of have a full circle moment getting those readings and learning about his internal processes and like how he was actually feeling because before that we're like Alabaster, you're kind of being a dick. Like, don't don't
You
be
just
like this, especially in
you're
the
just
Obelisk
breaking the
Gate.
earth
We're
everywhere.
like, come on, just quit doing this. Just tell us what's going on. But I love that relationship. But I also have spoken ad nauseum about the relationship between Esun and Yika and
Yes.
how much I love that. I also think that the relationship between Tonki or Beanoff as she was in um, the fifth season
Hmm.
and between Esun is very interesting and to see how that relationship evolved, but also like kind of stuck.
It stayed the same. Like they very much, like I was trying
Yes.
to think, and you and I had talked about this, where it's like, well, Donkey at the beginning of the books is very much Donkey at the end of the books. Like there's been no
Yes.
arc.
And
She's
it's
just
funny how
there.
there's very much no resentment or anything
Yeah.
between those two. And I find that just fascinating that she can just show up again in Essun's life, that she's been stalking her all this time and everything. And it's just very much like, all right, I guess we're traveling together. You're pretty much the same as the last time I saw you when we were kids. And it just fascinates me that they're able to just kind of fall back into it. But I also just think that the relationship between Asun and Nasun is the
It's
core
key.
of the
Yeah.
story. I mean,
Yes.
it this is we've joked that most things are about fathers and sons. This is literally about mothers and daughters.
Yes, it
And
is.
it's fantastic to finally get that type of story that is about relationships between women. And we have so many different relationships between women in this series, but a very important one is the relationship between a mother and a daughter.
It's also funny because I feel like when we were growing up, there was a very specific look at mother-daughter relationships where it's like the Lorelai and Emily, where you have like the free-spirited daughter who thinks she knows best, and the mom who's like rigid and can hurt her very specifically because she follows like the precepts of
Because
what
she's a
is.
fast talking, sarcastic girl who likes to watch movies.
Yes, and there you have the mom who's a straight-laced lady who thinks there's a proper way of doing things. And I would almost argue that that is Esun and Nasun, but it's like told through a lens of modern day storytelling where it's like, well, let's see what's up with the mother. Like that is an interesting storyline of what made her who she is. And even if we know that that could later harm her free-spirited daughter who just wants love and acceptance, we can actually understand what happened and where things went wrong. And that's an interesting and worthwhile story to tell about mothers and daughters. And I don't think it's often looked at.
I love that you see it that way because I feel like I've kind of gone with the take that Nasun is incredibly similar to Esun and in ways that like I know that I often will have moments where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm exactly like my parent doing that. And sometimes they're eye roll moments. But
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you had that take because I felt like I was seeing a lot of this series as Nasun and Esun being so incredibly similar and Esun kind of taking on this like don't make the mistakes that I made. You have to be better than me. We have to protect
Yeah.
you. We have to do these things to protect you and not noticing that in trying to do these things to improve upon her own situation in the form of her daughter that she was actually doing a lot of harmful things. But I think that a lot of times parents can do that, especially to a child who is similar to them, put immense
Yeah.
pressure on them and sometimes damage the relationship when they don't recognize all the similarities between their experiences and come at them from the angle of how can we attack this from a healthy standpoint, not let's just redo this in the way that I can control.
I do think it's kind of a both and though, because I think you can
Yeah.
always make the
Oh,
argument
yeah.
there are
There's a
people who
million
are
ways to take
so
this.
similar. But like it is interesting to read them because I do think Nasun is very similar to Asun in a
Hmm.
lot of ways. I mean, their names are so similar that I make the mistake all the time. But I also think it's one of those where it's like, yes, they're very similar, but also like Nasun is still so young. She's just so half like, she's unbaked. She could be molded in different ways that it's hard because like, well, of course you're going to be similar to your parents at that level and that stage. It's just going to be, what we see and where the parents can kind of pump the brakes on their own generational trauma, which we
Hmm.
see Esun do at the end, where she's just like, I can't stop this. I'm going to have to let her do it because that's what's
Hmm.
best for my daughter.
Yeah, for sure. I also think it's interesting too when we get into the stone sky and Esun finally makes that realization that of course Shafa is with Nasun
Mm-hmm.
and some of those feelings that probably occurred knowing that not only is her daughter going through a lot of similar things, she's connecting with similar people who have been incredibly harmful to her. And there's a lot of complicated emotions thinking about like, what did this person do to my daughter?
Mm-hmm.
And what, not only like, what kind of influence did I have on my daughter, but what type of influence has this person had on my daughter?
Yeah. I mean, and I feel like I almost don't even want to touch on the Shafa of it all because you and
Oh,
I have
really? I feel
talked
like we could
so.
talk so much about him.
I know, but we already have. Like, he's been
He's
so
the worst, but
talked
also
about. Like,
like, does he deserve redemption? No, but
I've read some articles that also fall on no, and I think that that is the right choice. Like, I don't think he deserved
gosh,
redemption. He's been around for thousands
I'll
and
just
thousands of years. You can't love one person and have it forgive all the bad things that you've
I
done.
mean, he's
Like,
technically persisted all this time because he has loved many of his charges, but we learn that later on. But I'll just say that I won't talk a lot about him. I'll just say that this is probably one of the most well crafted villains
yes,
ever that I've read because he's
yes,
horrendous and also just makes you feel slimy when you're reading about him. You get just the ick. Um,
Yeah.
just reading about him, knowing that he's going to be up to something, or that there's some kind of creepy little thing that he's thinking about
Well,
doing.
and like I know we do learn at the end that he loved all of his charges, but I also think it's so well done about the look at what abuse is, because
Hmm.
I think it's very easy for people to see abuse as hatred or, control, and it is all of those things. But there is a specific sense of I do love this person, and like it's not okay the way you love that
I
person. And I
I
think
think
that
the
Jemison
key
really
here
keys
is
into that.
I think the key here is the way that Shafa is depicted and the things that he says. He looks at his charges as being tools, as
Yes.
being weapons, as being useful. And we've mentioned in previous episodes how uncomfortable it is to talk about people in terms of their use or their value.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're talking about like things, it's okay to be like, I really love this thing that is an inanimate object and it has value to me. But when we're talking about people, that is incredibly harmful. And I think that
Yes.
that's where I kind of see Shafa's language not be in the right anymore, is
I agree.
because, and that's where I guess I'm able to easily draw the line and be like, okay, yeah, he sucks, because he
Yeah.
just looks at people in terms of what value he can assign
Mm-hmm.
them.
Yeah. Agreed.
But yeah,
No
we could
notes.
talk forever about him. He's
And we have.
and we have, and he's just one of the greatest villains that I've ever read,
It's
and
so
he gives me
good.
so many icky feelings. And Jemison did a wonderful, wonderful job creating this character.
Yeah, I agree. Agree wholeheartedly. I'm trying to think of what else we need to cover with the series, because these are our final thoughts.
Well, I mean,
Um,
I think the Stone Eaters are worth mentioning. Just
yes.
all of I'll admit that was my weak spot in the Stone Sky. I have had so much going on that I didn't give the Stone Sky its due in terms of describing what was happening within
Hey, you did a good
Silanages.
job, but it is very hard. It's
It's
it's a
very
hard
hard to get into
thing
all
to
of
get
that.
into. Yes.
And there was a lot going on for us to like pick all of this apart and break down like what was happening with all of them,
Mm-hmm.
because we have Hua and Gewa and Renwa, who are all kind of going about this journey to understand how they came to be.
Mm-hmm.
And the overarching story of this series, we learn, is told by Hoa and is being told to Esun, who
Mm-hmm.
is a new stone eater, to learn about how she came to be. And I think that that story in itself is fascinating, to tell a story within a story. I love when authors do that type of thing where it's like, oh, here we are. We're in this series. And then we learn at the end, like, oh, it's all a story that's been told. But it was so poetic and well done. And I think framing it from the view of Hoa, who doesn't fully understand his origins and know for sure, like, what's going on within his own world, even though he has a lot of clues. But it's interesting to have that type of character be the narrator and be describing the events that have transpired and how we got to where we are.
See, it's funny because I think I, I always feel so torn when it comes to, and I'm here telling you this story all along, like a la Jane the
I mean,
Virgin
this
and
is
things
well
like
done.
that. It is very well done. I sometimes just blanch against those, but I do think it is very well
I
done.
would
And
never have drawn the Jane the Virgin connection.
I've been Mateo the whole time. I'm watching this TV show called uh, Dropout. It's like very, or no, it's called Game Changer, and you don't know the rules until you play it. And the person who hosts it, he always goes, "And I've been here the whole time." And so it's just like that's the energy sometimes. But I,
Mhm.
I I agree with you that I think it is well done here. It's really effective, and like I do think it's important that we did learn more about Hoa and learned more about the people, because the Stone Eaters are so hard to wrap your heads around. Like you're
Yeah.
reading about these people who have existed for millennia, and that is incredibly difficult to pull off because, like, at some point in time, they're tired of existing, but they also
Hmm.
don't want to die. And I think that that is a very human look at these, like, ethereal creatures that exist where you
Right.
don't fully understand how they function. You don't understand how they can go on forever and ever, but you do understand that that's what's happening and you have to be along for the ride because like there are moments where Ho is like, "Oh yeah, I was asleep for the whole time, but I had consciousness and there's all these complexities, but don't worry about it." I'm like, "Yeah, that is how you have to handle that type of thing because this is a
Hmm.
very hard character to pull off. A character who can just exist in and out of time, and sometimes they need rest, but oh by the way, they may not be resting during that time. They may just be
Hmm.
trapped." And I think that
It,
that's
it
just
almost makes
it's
me
so
think too,
good.
it's like if you think about maybe this is just me, maybe you don't do this, but sometimes if I think about just like my own existence or like any of like bodily function too long, I'm like, it's breaking my brain. I can't think about it too much. Like I don't know if you've ever just like looked at your hand and then you just stare at your hand for a while and you're just like, I gotta stop. Hands are weird. It's freaking me out. But I kind of feel like what you're getting to is like, yeah, if you think about it too much, it's just like, yeah, we got to take a break. We can't think about it
Yeah,
too hard.
I have to
It's
walk away
too
from the
complicated,
situation.
and I'm getting
Yeah.
freaked out.
I do think that there's a lot of like, oh, it's just my brain's broken and I don't like it and I can't talk about it anymore. But
Hmm.
I have not felt like that. But I also am the first to say that Hannah thought she was going to die young. I thought I was going to die at the age of 20. So my body is just something that I'm like, wow, it's impressive that you still exist. Like, um, but yeah, I don't know. It's such a complicated thing to talk about the Stone Eaters because there's so much there but there's also not enough. Like I feel like we need a novella about Stone Eaters just at one of their summits where they all meet up and they're like, I guess we're talking about this now. Like,
I've seen other people online say that they'd like to return to the world or whatever, or get more novellas, more info or whatever. I honestly hope this is one of those things that Jemison never returns to it
oh
and
yeah,
just
no, no,
like
no, it's
leaves it as it
perfect.
is because
But
I'm just like, you know what? I don't think we need more info. I like being in this area where it's like we don't need to know everything. And I kind of think that that's more interesting, honestly, to be in a situation where it's like, do we know all there is to know about Stone Eaters? Absolutely not. But let's just leave it where it is. And I I kind of like being able to question their existence a little more and not know for sure like even though we know like okay they can come out of obelisks and they have these geodes that they break out of and they're like almost molten and can be remade out of origins can be remade into stone eaters and everything. It's like I don't know that I need to know more about it than what we've been provided.
Laura says, I'm
Kind
done.
of I kind of just like a little bit of not knowing.
Yeah, I think that that is a fair take. I wouldn't mind, I never mind a novella. But I also like that this is a completed series in and of
Hmm.
itself, that we were here for a good time, not a long time. And
Hmm.
this was the story that Jemison wanted to tell. Because I think it can be hard for authors for something as this like impressive and this expansive, where they're like, just return to what you already did. And it's like, no, I have other stories to
Right.
tell. The well is not dry. And the well is certainly not dry because my husband has read The City We Became, and he talks about that book all the time.
Hmm.
So I think it shows that Jemison is just getting started, really, and she has so many more things
I mean, she's
than,
got a
yeah.
lot of other works.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think that she's definitely got other stories. I'm sure that her other stuff is really great too, but for whatever reason, some stories kind of take off more than others.
Yeah.
So it may be just that the Broken Earth trilogy was the one that really hit people at the right time and had its viral moment. Even though I
Yeah.
I don't consider it to be one that's like a super popular series on different like social medias yet. I
It is and
it's
it
out there.
isn't.
It's out there.
Yeah.
It's like people are aware of it, but it's not one where you have people listing like these are the fantasy series you must read and in every single video you see that one. Like I feel like you often see
Yeah.
like there's always going to be a Brandon Sanderson book
Oh,
in those series. But I feel like occasionally you'll have people that are like, "Oh, you must read the Broken Earth trilogy or whatever, your fantasy starter pack." I don't always see it mentioned. And so I would consider it to be like known, but not like viral. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. It's always one of those things where I feel
And
like
it depends on what circles you're
you're
in as
not,
well, too.
yes, that is, I
But
think it's a circles thing where I'm like, yeah, you're right. In the traditional spaces of people who have it, like I feel like a
mhm.
lot of people are like, it's a slow, it's kind of under the radar. It's not like on the top of the top. But I do feel like if you're following the specific people that you and I often follow, it's like, oh no, it's everywhere and a lot of people push this. And
I
so
mean, I know a lot of people who have read it and really are like big fans and are recommending it to people. But I'm just thinking of like on my brief stint on TikTok, RIP, because I'm no longer there. Uh, I didn't
I mean,
really
it's
see
still there,
a lot.
but
I I'm saying RIP to my TikTok
oh,
because I do
got
not
it.
use it. But I felt like when I was seeing TikToks of people recommending fantasy books, I didn't see the Broken Earth trilogy mentioned that
That's
much.
fair. Yeah, it all. I just recently when I saw a TikTok that's like, if you don't see these, it's because you didn't cultivate them, and I'm like, that
Yeah,
is
but you're new to
important as well.
TikTok. You don't know
Yeah,
how to cultivate.
exactly. Yeah, you gotta search it out.
Recommend be better, algorithm.
Do be better algorithm. That is the important part. But yeah, I feel like this is such an important series. It's so interesting. I mean, every single one of them won the Hugo Award.
Yeah.
So like it's obviously worth our time to read this and I think it's because there are so many layers and I do think you and I could do like a million bonus episodes on the Stone
Hmm.
Eaters and do a deep dive on Shafa. And this is a book that just lends itself to going deeper and deeper each time, which is why I'm like, "Oh yeah, I am jealous that you got to do a reread. This is so impressive."
I would recommend the audiobooks too because I I did the audiobooks and also the physical books when I was doing the plot this time, but I
Yeah.
had initially just read the physical books and then I got the audiobooks on Libro FM and was just listening to them like just casually and like kind of tapping in here or there. So I've technically read the series 3 times if you count
Yeah.
just like in and out listening, but Robin Miles does a really great job narrating the series. And so I'd highly recommend picking up that version of the series as
Oh,
well,
good.
especially if you're doing a reread.
I
But
love it.
just had a couple questions if you had like favorite book out of the trilogy and if you had
Ooh.
maybe favorite character or moment.
Oh, jeez. So favorite book, it's such a hard toss up because I did really enjoy the first book. I just think it was such an excellent way of like getting us involved, having us with Assoon, like really starting that up. I was just so impressed with that. And I know you didn't love the Obelisk Gate as much as the other two. I really enjoyed that book. I thought it was just so effective. I do think there were parts of the Stone Sky that I didn't know if I was fully bought into. Like specifically, we learned a lot about the Stone Eaters, but it was hard for me personally to follow just because we kind of got dropped into them at the very end. And I feel like I didn't have the ramp up like I did with the other characters and the other sections. So I do really feel like I loved book one and two so much. And for a highlight of a moment, like it's such a heartbreaking scene, but Nasun and the final scene with Jija is so heart-wrenchingly sad.
Hmm.
And I think it's perfectly mirrored by Esun like going to see him for the final time.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's just such a beautiful way to storytell and such a beautiful like overall vision of what Jemisin did that just sticks out in my mind of moments that I remember being like heartbroken for or just like feeling so many emotions for. But what about
Hmm.
you?
You know, I think I stand by my decision to say that the Obelisk Gate was my least favorite. And again,
Hmm.
that's like saying like out of the types of chocolate, I like
I
white
almost said
chocolate the
like
least.
brownies, cookies, or cake.
Yeah, it's like which do I like the least? Candy
Yeah,
or cake? Hmm.
right.
I like both. And I will eat both of them in mass quantities. So
Exactly.
go ahead and judge. But
Why are
yeah,
you and
so
I on such the same page
yeah, I just
today?
so me being like, I don't like the obelisk gate. It's not true. I like the obelisk gate a lot. It's just when I'm like trying to compare and make a decision like this, I'm like, yeah, I think the obelisk gate was the one that was just a slower pace for me.
Hmm.
And that was definitely just like a huge shift from the first
Yes.
book where the first book felt so fast paced to me the first time I read it that I was just like really trying to get answers.
Mm-hmm.
That I think that one sticks out in my mind the most, and I can recall a lot of the events in the first book better than the second book.
That's fair.
But I think if I were to have to rank the series in the books, I might go 1, 3, 2.
Mm. I think I am a strong 1, 2, 3 girly. So,
Yeah.
which is pretty impressive because I don't think people do second books very effectively very often. A
Yeah,
hot
that's
take,
true.
I know. Like, no one thinks
Fonda
the
Lee would
second
beg
book.
to differ,
Yeah.
but and we would let her.
Always. There's never a
But
time where Fonda couldn't tell me that I'm wrong and I wouldn't just be like, I'm taking the note.
but yeah, I I think for me it's 1, 3, 2. I think that some of the more meaningful things in my mind were, or just for me, were some of those moments between Esun and Yika in the third book. I really appreciated a lot of those connection moments between the two of them. I also really did enjoy getting the background of the Stone Eaters in the third book and those moments with Nasun and Esun. But I think favorite moments were definitely the first book,
Mm,
where we're getting, especially the Cyan chapters. I was so into the
so
Cyan
good.
and Alabaster chapters, and I loved when they were, you know, with Inan and in their place of happiness for a period of time.
Hmm.
So I think those chapters specifically were my favorite throughout the whole series, being with Cyan and Alabaster and their travels and kind of breaking the world for Cyan and her understanding of herself and what she knew of her life.
Amazing. Any
But
final
favorite
thoughts?
character?
Oh, favorite character. Ooh. Um, I mean, if we take Esun out of the running,
Yeah, we got to take
because like
Esun out because I
she's
think we both
just
pick Esun.
like it's just like, what's your favorite chocolate? Chocolate.
Hmm.
I think for me, I do actually think you're right that Yika is probably the best character after Esun, just because Yika has so many like so much depth. She's such a catalyst for Esun. And she's so important to like challenge the reader on Esun's worldview because we've
Hmm.
just been with Esun for so long, or people who are kind of yes people to Esun when we like meet her, where it's like you have Tonki and you have Hoa, and they're both like
Hmm.
team Esun. And I do think Ika is really important because she does get frustrated and she does have those moments of like shining, and she is kind of the beleaguered leader who's just like,
Hmm.
I'm just doing my best. Could you do anything for me? And I'm just very impressed with her as an overall character. Um, but yeah, what about you?
Definitely Shafa. No.
I just
I
think
will
he's
say though,
misunderstood.
I I will say though, just from the standpoint of how well written that villain is,
Oh my
I,
gosh, yeah.
I do consider that to be one of my favorite villains I've ever read.
Yes.
So if we're calling out just like favorite characters we've ever read, Shafa may be up there, but in terms of like characters that we like, I would have to say Alabaster would be
Mm,
maybe because you said Yika, so I'm going to say something different because I've talked ad nauseum about how much I love Yika and that
yes.
relationship. So I'm going to say Alabaster
But
just
she really means
because
Tika.
Hannah stole Yika, so I'm being different. So I'm going to say Alabaster because this is a book about women, so I'm going to pick a man. And
Perfect.
but no, I really do think that Alabaster is a fantastic character, and I was heartbroken getting some of
Uh,
the backstory of his life and just these little crumbs of the mistreatment and heartbreak that he has been through and all of the hardship that has made him who he is and how he just cares so deeply for Cyan and has literally all the hope in the world in her.
yeah,
So yeah, Alabaster probably my second favorite, third favorite character.
perfect.
2.5.
All right. With that said, this is a sad moment because we're
We're
exiting
done.
one of the best series that we've ever covered. This
Hmm.
is like it's so beautiful. Everyone go read it. If you're listening to
Hmm.
this, what are you doing? Go
We
read
spoiled
this
the whole
book.
thing. You shouldn't
Yeah,
be here.
we told you who the best characters were, so come on. Um, but please make sure that you are getting this book. Make sure you're reading, rereading, doing all those things. But thank you so much for
Yeah,
following along with us for another season as we
we
broke
really
into the
appreciate it.
earth. This was an amazing adventure. I'm so glad we finally got to read it. It's so
Hmm.
important. And just it's amazing overall. So we just appreciate all of you guys supporting us for another season. And next week we are doing our indie mission knockout rounds. We are going to hopefully the picks will be posted on Thursday. I am creating the
Hmm.
post. It should go up Thursday, so please check ourpod.com for the lineup. And then on next Wednesday, we will be doing knockout rounds similar to what we did the last time. Social medias are hellfire right now, so there's
Yeah,
no
it's
good
just hard
place
to
to do
decide
the
where
voting.
to vote. So
And as you know, Laura's been going through it with stuff. I'm still coming back from like wedding crashes and things like that. So we just figured this was the best for us to pick the next indie mission. And then the week after, it's back to cycling through Legendborn. So make sure
mhm.
you're reading Oathbound and getting ready for some
So good.
hot takes. Because we just really appreciate you guys listening to us. And then we will cover the indie mission book. So we're giving everyone time to get the book
Yeah,
and
we're
read
giving
it.
everyone a month to get the book, read it,
And
and
of
then
course, we will be hosting a giveaway for whoever is the
mhm.
winner. So please make sure you're following along for that. Please also make sure that you're rating, reviewing, and subscribing. That's a huge and important way to get our content out there and help.
It really does help. Like
And
even if you
please
just tell a
tell a
friend,
friend.
we would
Just
love that.
we would love that. We just want to get more people to join in the conversation. Someone joined our Discord last week and it made our day. So please just make sure that you're following along. You can follow us on all social media platforms. Like I said, we do have a Discord. We're not super active, but we want to be more active. So
We're
definitely reach out to
introverts,
us
so
there.
start the conversation.
I need to get more active about talking about books. I'll try to talk about the book I'm reading right now because I'm
Maybe
super
we'll have to
interested in
get
it.
like 20 questions, like
Oh
conversation
my
starters going over there.
gosh. Maybe Hannah just needs to get a job that has less stress to it, even though this was the job that was supposed to
Two
lead to less
truths and a
stress.
lie. We'll start
um,
playing that there.
oh my goodness. So follow us along there, or you can follow us on all the social medias where we exist at OWWR Pod. And join us next week as we do a knockout round of 12 different
Bing
indie
bing.
intermission books that are actually diverse authors. So that's something
Yeah.
we wanted to highlight with this indie mission. So please make sure you are checking all of them out,
Hmm.
but that you are listening to figure out which book you need to read next. And thanks again for listening. Bye.
Bye.